Welcome to the Journey Mindfulness Podcast, where we dive into the minds shaping the stories of empowerment we love. Today, we're spotlighting a trailblazer who's redefined entertainment for a global audience, Ann Sarnoff. With over 3 decades steering iconic brands like Warner Brothers, the BBC, Viacom, and Dow Jones, Sarnoff made history as the first woman to lead a major movie, TV, and gaming studio. From catapulting HBO Max to new heights to reimagining DC Comics and Harry Potter for a new era, she sparked creativity, shattered silos, and driven billions in revenue, all while navigating a seismic shift in how we consume media, and also during COVID. So buckle up for a front row seat to her journey from the boardrooms of Nickelodeon and BBC to the helm of WarnerMedia's $35 billion empire. This is part of Ann Sarnoff's story, and it's one you won't want to miss. Ann, thank you very much for being here and spending time with us today.
Thank you, Jim, for that very kind introduction, and I'm really happy to be here with you.
Well, you've had a remarkable career and it's not over yet. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm enjoying my time. I'm on a few corporate boards, commercial boards, and really enjoying that post my Warner Brothers job and loving life.
Um, so this was not on purpose, but I'm rocking Georgetown colors. So
Go
there you
Hoyas.
go.
Very, very good.
Always. Well, you're on the Journey Mindfulness podcast, where we talk about, among other things, transformation, overcoming self-limiting beliefs, and finding creative ways to empower ourselves and others. Um, what makes your story unique to me is that not only did you step into your own power on your own journey, but that you have also had the ability to lift up others and illuminate them, which is really beautiful. So you've had this remarkable impact on people. What kind of comes to mind when I say those words to you on your journey that you really had to kind of work through to get where you are?
Oh, well, it's an interesting layered question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is that I am so fortunate to have had many people in my journey who have lifted me up, and starting from very early age, great bosses and people who believed in me, family members who believed in me. And I have a bit of a circuitous, non-traditional path to the role I eventually was stepped into at Warner Brothers, but in a serendipitously wonderful way. Like, small town girl who never had could dream of being the head of a studio. Many stops along the way, and I'm standing on the shoulders of a lot of people who mentored me and helped me and kind of gave me guidance at key points in that journey. And so I think part of the reason I love mentoring younger people now is because I was the beneficiary of so much great advice and so many people who really took an interest in me. And I'm happy to chat about any of that with you.
Yeah, I mean, on your journey, maybe what are some of the key points or the main events, or moments that you had that stand out to you as you reflect on some things?
Well, I would say that I had, kind of a background where I didn't have a particularly easy childhood. I know, kind of Psych 101, go back to the childhood, but I think I have a lot of my resilience in terms of my capacity to do things from my childhood. We didn't have a lot of money. I've been working, babysitting since I was 9, working at a day camp and waitressing in my teenage years, and really just working really hard and having to make money. I also played a lot of sports, which I think was, in retrospect, very helpful to my ability to compete and to feel like I deserve a spot on the team and I've got to give it all for the team and help lead teams. You don't really see those things when you're a kid playing high school sports, but in retrospect, I think that really helped shape a part of who I am.
Yeah.
And you could probably, I know you've played a few sports in your life, so I think you could probably relate to that.
Well, it's interesting. Going back, I won some MVP awards on some of my teams, and that was always really validating.
Hmm.
But I was often afraid to sort of step into that leadership role and really take the lead and be seen. So like I was very comfortable like allowing my play to do the talking and whatever. But when it came to that voice, kind of really stepping up and taking command of, a group of guys, in my situation, I really hid from that. And that's something I've had to work on far later in life. But so maybe you can speak to that a little bit, because if you were embracing those roles earlier, like there's some level of fear perhaps that you had to overcome, or just stepping into your power and really your courage in that way.
Well, were you on individual sports or team sports?
Did a mix, but the MVP awards were usually a team things.
Hmm. That's great. Well, I was elected captain of the three sports that I played my senior year, which was softball, basketball, and field hockey. I don't
Hmm.
know if I stepped into the power so much. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal, but I think being voted on by your peers to lead the team as a captain, I think was very empowering. And I think the other empowering piece is just when you do well in school and you get good grades, and then you kind of build some confidence that you can you can succeed at the things you set your mind to. So I think the parallel journeys between getting good grades in a very big public high school and then playing sports gave me the confidence. I'm not sure I had as much confidence as I needed way back then, but I think every step along the way helped reinforce skills and things that were kind of showing some signs early on in my life.
Hmm. Well, what's interesting is that you were, voted in or elected to be the leader, and it sounds like you embraced it,
Yeah.
whereas I turned it down.
Oh, okay.
So there was something in me, like a hesitation to
Mm,
embrace that. If that so like that sort of fear of taking that responsibility, I guess.
yeah. I didn't really have that kind of fear. I mean, it doesn't mean that I always succeeded at what I did, but I guess because, I have friends who have somewhat famous parents, and there's more expectations when you come from a family that is already successful than I came from a working class family whose parents worked really hard, and great older siblings who were mentoring me in whatever way they could. But I didn't have any expectations put on me about what my career needed to be because I didn't have any role models in my career. So I think expectations in life is kind of like the key to happiness. It's like your happiness is equals expectations minus, or reality minus expectations, right?
Yeah.
The higher the expectations, the lower the quotient is for happiness. So um, I think that was kind of a clean slate for me as I stepped into what then became my career. I didn't have a lot of people telling me what to do, um, and that's the good news and the bad news. I didn't have role models per se, but I also didn't have any heavy expectations put on me that I had to do certain things in certain time periods. And in fact, I spoke at the Georgetown McDonough graduation last spring. And one of the things I told the students, well, two of the things, build relationships, because relationships are everything. And, they're just so important in life in so many different ways, personally and career wise. And the second thing was not to make a plan, because I think, especially in the last couple of decades, parents are just much more involved with their kids' lives than certainly what I experienced. And I think you can kind of over engineer what you should be doing, getting good grades, getting into a good school, getting a good job. And like, there's a lot of pressure that comes from other people about what you should be doing. And I and it's good to have champions and people helping you pave your path. But on the other hand, it also sets up this huge kind of hurdle that you need to get over at every step, because somebody else is imposing that their will onto you. And I think the plans can be very limiting, because in my career, I wouldn't have taken certain jobs if I had a fixed set of what I needed to be doing, or when I needed to be promoted, and what time frame or what industry I should go into. I had none of that. I had a clean slate. So it allowed me to make some lateral moves and some interesting decisions along the way, because there was nobody telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear you say that, because one of the sort of concepts in mindfulness is having no attachment to the outcome. Because if you do, then you will sort of you can unknowingly limit yourself if you think this is the path that you have to take to get to the top of the mountain, if you will, when everyone's path is different. And if you're not paying attention to your own path, you can sort of be caught living someone else's life, or, get stuck in some other track that's not really aligned with your own.
I love that. I have to remember that next time I'm playing golf and I'm not playing very well. And I need to not worry about the score and just enjoy every shot, right? I guess that's the theory.
Well, you can't change the past, right? So it's
right.
kind of just refocusing into the present moment as best you can, and then going for it. Because inevitably, like in your career and everything else, you have to take risks, and so you have to be willing to do that. And there was a definition of confidence I heard somewhat recently, and it's a confidence is the willingness to be socially injured.
Mm.
And when you're going to take a risk to feel secure and safe enough to do that, you can't really worry about the outcome, because it may be great and it may not.
Well, it's interesting when you say taking risks and, not being attached to the outcome. If you don't know where something is leading, you don't know what outcome to expect. And therefore, it doesn't look risky. So back to the golf game, you're supposed to get a low score, right? And you know what you've gotten in the past.
Sure.
So that's easy to measure. If you're kind of finding your way through a career with nobody telling you what to do and no particular plan, it doesn't feel as risky. And when you say that, it kind of does definitely remind me of the feeling I had as I was going through my career, which is, well, got nothing to lose. Might as well try this. What's the downside? What's the worst thing that could happen? Right.
Yeah.
And so it didn't feel risky. In retrospect, there were maybe things that were, when I was at Nickelodeon and I was running the strategy group, and then there were some changes at the top, and they asked me to take over the consumer products business. That was not the sexiest business there. And so to others, it may have looked, quote unquote, risky, because it wasn't in, the crown jewel, which is the programming group. But that job turned out to be one of the key linchpins of my career in terms of giving me a P&L, figuring out how to turn the business around and grow it into a very large business. And, it opened up a whole new world and a whole new pathway for me. And if I had just looked at it as take the sexy job, I might have said no, but instead I thought, well, okay, I can figure this out. I can do this. And, building franchises, which is what I ended up doing, turned out to be a pretty key skill set for me in my other jobs subsequently.
Yeah. And I'm not I don't have a business background. You said a P&L. What is that?
Oh, right. Profit and loss, meaning you are responsible for the economics of the business.
Okay.
So
you're accountability.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to a functional role like marketing or communications, et cetera, where you're running a department. These are P&Ls are businesses within a broader corporate structure. So it's often said, and I believe this to be true for my career, that if you want to run something down the road, like be a CEO or a president or a general manager or something, it's important to get P&L responsibility early in your career to demonstrate that you can be accountable, as you said, and be responsible for the bottom line, if it goes well and if it doesn't go well, and all of the decisions that are involved in running that business.
Mm. So then from the outside looking in, that might have looked like a risky move. It ended up being a very pivotal move for you. How did you come to that decision? Like, did you, because that, getting back to like the moment in mindfulness, like those are, that was a big moment for you. How did you make that decision?
Well, just backtracking a little bit, I had a marketing major from Georgetown. I then got a job at the last minute, right before graduation, in a boutique consulting firm. There were no companies really hiring marketing majors at the time, except for Procter and Gamble, and they were in Cincinnati, and I wanted to stay on the East Coast. And so I found this job at a boutique consulting firm called Kaiser Associates. And about a year into it, the other analysts, there was only 9 of us in the firm. The other 4 analysts were applying to get their MBA. And again, no particular plan. I thought, well, I'll get an MBA, even though I was up to my ears in debt. Got into some good schools. I ended up going to Harvard Business School and had an amazing couple of years there. Again, that's back to my serendipitous walk through life. Never had any plans to get a graduate degree. Certainly didn't have the money necessarily to do it. And then when I graduated from there, I had so much debt. I ended up going back into consulting, into a larger strategy consulting firm, because I had so many bills to pay, and stayed in that firm for a few years and really learned about how companies work and how to advise them on their strategy. And then after a few years and getting married and having my first child, I thought, I really need to go into a business that I have more passion for. And I had always loved the music business. I come from a very musical family. We all, play instruments, and music's a big part of our lives. So I started looking at music companies, and an opportunity came up at a company that was then called Viacom in the corporate development group, and Viacom owns MTV. So I thought, aha, this is how I'm going to get my foot in the door in the music business. And I got a job, like right place, right time. Another one of these serendipitous moments where I'm sitting across from this very powerful guy who was at the top of the company. And I had nothing on my resume that showed I could do that particular, or that I knew that particular industry, but I had been in consulting and understood strategy and how companies work at a higher level. And so he hired me, took a bet on me. And that's one of the other themes in my career. A lot of people have taken bets on me along the way because it looked like I worked hard, I was smart enough, and I was eager, and kind of like really tried to sell my skills into him. Like, I study things, I'm quick, and I can figure this out. And he put me on a project with Nickelodeon, and a year later, Nickelodeon hired me to be head of strategy, and that's how I got. I wound my way from consulting into corporate development, which is like the strategy group at a corporation, into the Nickelodeon job, which was in strategy. And then subsequently, every year I got an additional responsibility. The next one was to take over the research group at Nickelodeon, which was very central to how Nickelodeon worked, and really understanding kids was a key part of why Nickelodeon felt it was, the number one brand for kids and the number one network for kids. And so I got kind of into the core of Nickelodeon through my running of the research group and restructuring that and helping it to be even better in what it does. And then I inherited the finance group, and then the next piece was inheriting the consumer products group, which goes back to where I was a few minutes ago as to how I got to that journey, or how I got to that point in the journey. And none of those things were really that big of a deal. It just was like, it was the next logical thing. I just kept finding my way, mostly with the go with your gut, leaving consulting because I knew I wasn't that passionate about it. I had paid down my loans.
Yeah.
Time to kind of, okay, now I'm going to go into an industry that I really care about. And by the way, I took a pay cut when I went from consulting into media. And I remember some fellow consultants saying, like, are you really making that much money? I was like, no, but we're working so hard. If you divide it by like number of hours, I probably got a pay raise.
Uh-huh.
So, it's all kind of relative. Like if you're just solving for continual promotion, continual pay increases, you might get on a track that doesn't lead to the outcome that's going to make you happy. And I think the places where I pivoted were really, really important ones. And again, it's because I didn't have a fixed notion of what I should be doing at any point in time. I kept my mind open and kept the aperture as wide as it could be.
Well, what you said you said a lot of things, but one of the things, you trusted your gut. So you have to know yourself pretty well to kind of go with that. And then the other thing is, when you were in that interview, that you had to sell yourself. You had to, in a sense, bet on yourself. You had to believe in yourself. What was that like? Because a lot of times, people that I see in my counseling practice, they might never have done what the job that they're applying for is, but they have the skill set to do it. And it's like, they have this glass ceiling that they see in front of them, and they're not willing to take a risk like that. What was that like for you? Or did you like to bet on yourself in a sense?
I think it's a cumulative muscle that you build. And, going back to when you're on a team or, I was a pitcher in the softball team, and you stand out there and all eyes are on you, and there's a lot of pressure, but you got to go out there believing that you're going to throw some good pitches, right? Or, you got to get good grades, and you need the grades to get into a good college. And by the way, the Georgetown piece, is I'm only sitting here today, honestly, because Georgetown met my full financial need with loans and work study and grants. And they had just instituted that policy of, if you apply and you get in, we will meet your full financial need. And that's the reason I was able to go to as good of a school. So the betting on yourself kind of came over time in these various stages, including when I applied for that consulting job out of Georgetown at Kaiser Associates. They had 80 resumes, and they said, looks like you work really hard. We're going to hire you. And, everybody's smart at a certain level. So I thought, okay, well, they just took a bet on me, so I'm going to bet on myself. And then, when I'm sitting across the desk trying to go from consulting into media, I said to this guy who ended up hiring me, Tom Dooley, I said, look, I've been studying new industries for a living, studying businesses, advising mostly guys, mostly twice my age, what to do with their companies. I think I can figure this out. Like, I want to do this. And he's like, okay. It was just enough of a logical argument that he was like, okay, well, she seems really hungry for it. And, was I 100% sure I was going to be successful? No, of course not. But I had figured other things out along the way that helped to give me the confidence to kind of put myself out there. And again, nothing to lose. Like, if he says no, I'll knock on some other doors.
Well, that's risky.
Yeah.
not,
well,
not
I don't
everyone.
see it. I didn't see it that way, because that was my only shot of, if I don't convince him right now to hire me, then then there's no risk. I mean, if I don't get it, then I just got to go find another job or stay in consulting. But then at Nickelodeon, when I did get into corp dev and they gave me this project on Nickelodeon, when I started to show that I could learn their business pretty quickly and add some value to them, then they started giving me more responsibilities. And one big piece was I was asked to lead a project to flesh out a business plan or an idea for a new channel, which we eventually called Noggin.
Hmm.
And we wanted to kind of extend Nickelodeon into more edutainment. And so for the better part of a year, I led a team of about 20 people, and we created the whole concept, like the creative concept, the brand, the logo, the business plan. And this is at a time in my life when I had a 3-year-old and a newborn, and a very a lot of additional responsibility. And I said, okay, I volunteered to lead the Noggin task force. And
Yeah.
so one of the things I tell younger people when I'm mentoring them is, like, really try to stretch your capabilities by volunteering for things, which sometimes feels like, well, I can't. I'm busy. I can't work any harder. But if you push yourself, especially younger at a younger stage in your career, oftentimes it demonstrates a new set of skills that you can then add to your toolkit. Like for me, leading that team of 20 people demonstrated that I could lead teams and come up with, new creative ideas and new business plans, et cetera. And that was one of the key precursors, I think, to when they ended up giving me the consumer products business to run. She's like, well, she led that Noggin team for a year
Hmm.
successfully. And so again, it's cumulative. It's not
It
like
also
it's not a
goes,
180. It accumulates over time.
yeah, and then I mean it also goes back to that theme of, this new thing. There's no definition of what it's supposed to look like or it has to be. So there's this air of creativity in that too, in innovation,
I
really.
love I love that part. I love kind of the clean canvas of what can we create here? How can we, in that case, how can we take the brand equity of Nickelodeon, which is very playful and morphing, like super serving kids in a playful dimension of their lives, and what do we take from that to create a more educational brand? Um, so we ended up, I don't know if you remember Noggin, but we ended up having a face as a head as the logo, and the top of the head always morphed. Like it always had different things going on each year.
Oh,
And
I
that
don't
was
know that. Yeah.
that was so not always real time, but like you see this logo, and it's got this top of the Noggin head, and then another one has a set of beakers up there, or this one has, like, question marks coming out of it. And the top of the head was the kind of um, tribute to Nickelodeon as its origins in that ever morphing piece. And the bottom of it was, it's stable, it's steady, it's not going to change. That's your head. And we're going into edutainment. So I don't know, there was a lot of different creative elements that I thought were um have storylines behind them that I'm not sure everybody knows, but it's how we got into a brand new area of the business.
Well, you said a lot of good things. I want to make sure in my world of hypnosis and meditation, that I touch on them, but it's communicating. So you had to be good at communicating, but speaking with people and selling them and pitching them on yourself and your ideas. There's a certain amount of certainty that you have to have about yourself. And so that's a concept of, if you think of, in terms of like words and frequency and vibration, like your being, your presence in the moment, having that ability to be certain about yourself and what you're saying, and then capability, that goes back to effort and just believing that, or maybe experimenting and realizing you have more ability than you realize, which is the case for most people. But that's a big self-limiting thing that people come across. And then innovation and creativity. For people, not we all have an imagination, but a lot of times we stop using it as much. And that sounds like that's, you were able to sort of flourish in those roles and in these businesses.
Well, thank you. I think that I do have a combination of left brain, right brain. My mother was very creative. My father was a doer and got things done, and very, and in that generation, kind of believed that I could do anything. He said to me, "You can be anything you want to be. You should play sports. You should play golf, because you got to get out there with the guys."
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and I didn't play golf because he was a tough customer, and that was his sport. So he was actually a greenskeeper at a country club, which is how he got to be very good at golf.
Mm.
And so I played team sports, and then of course now I'm playing golf because it's probably in my DNA. But yeah, the mix of the left brain, right brain really helps, especially in the media industry. And then your point about having the confidence and belief in yourself, and how do you sell that? I think, one of the things I've thought about is how I found my voice,
Mm.
literally and figuratively. And I think it took me a while. I think my brain was always kind of ahead of my voice in the process, especially in the early part of my career. And meaning, like, I thought a lot more than I could find a way to say or had the
Okay.
opportunity to say. So it's better than, I think, your voice being ahead of your brain.
Well, yeah, I mean, the other way around, it
Yeah.
could come across a certain kind of way for sure.
Yeah. But I think over time, like, the more confidence I built, the more I was able to find my voice. And in fact, my boss at Nickelodeon said to me once, I think it was my first review, he said, you've got a lot of good ideas. You need to speak up more. And I thought, wow, okay, I can do that. Like, I feel like I needed permission for him to do that. And as soon as he said it, I showed up in a very different way.
Hmm.
Um, and that was a bit of an unlock for me. And then there was a project that a very kind of famous Hollywood person was pitching to Nickelodeon to take over some of our airspace, and I really didn't think it was a good idea, and so I spoke up. I kind of felt like now I have permission, and I spoke up. I said that I don't think this is good for us, because we're going to be dependent on this situation, and then when that situation goes away, we're still stuck with, having to fill our airtime. And so
Hmm.
anyway, it was a moment where people at the top really listened to me, and then every time something came up that I didn't believe in, it got easier and easier for me to build the argument as to why we should or shouldn't do something. And ultimately, they developed enough confidence in me to give me a business to run. So
Well, and
it's not,
trust. I
yeah,
mean, they
and the
had to
trust.
trust you. Yeah.
So it is a combination of knowing, kind of selling yourself, but also following through with, it can't just be selling yourself. You have to perform and come through with the results. And then having the confidence, because, and I've hired a lot of people in my career. There are some very smart people out there that don't necessarily kind of inspire the confidence in you to give them a big responsibility. Like, you have to see them build up their own volition and their own kind of track record of making good decisions before you hand something over to them. So it's like the resume, but it's also the personality and how you step into something, and find your voice, take your bets, etc. And when I transitioned from strategy to the consumer products business, I felt like I was making 30 decisions a day, because, like, when you're doing strategy, you're advising other people what to do. Now my butt was on the line, and I had accountability, and people are coming into my office asking me what to do, and I was like, oh my god, I have to make all these decisions. And you just have to come to terms with that, and realize you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to make every decision perfectly, but there's like an 80-20 rule. And the worst thing you can do is not make any decisions and then just leave your whole team standing there like deers in headlights.
Yeah.
That's another version of risk taking. You've got to be comfortable enough to say, look, I think I know enough about this to go in this direction. And we made some really key decisions about Rugrats and Blue's Clues and SpongeBob and all of those franchises that, affected what we were going to do with the strategy of rolling out products, and what businesses, what other line extensions to get into in each of those businesses, and how to manage the brands and franchises. So the job became much bigger than just, like selling t-shirts. It became a critical part of the Nickelodeon ecosystem, and how we showed up in the world. Because at the end of the day, the television screen turned off in the house. It was all those other products and businesses, and the
Yeah.
Rugrats live show or the theme park attractions that we did, that really represented how those, how kids feel about those brands, and developed a deeper emotional connection with kids in those properties.
How did you deal with the pressure of mounting responsibilities and the mounting frequency of decision making? Because that's a big deal. You know, you talked about indecision can in a sense paralyze you and your organization and anything else. But to be able to make a decision and not worry, that gets back to that non-attachment to outcome. Like, okay, 80-20, many of these are going to be right, some of these are going to be wrong. We have to be okay with that. That takes a thick skin, anti-fragility. Maybe that goes back to sports,
Mhm.
but how did you work with that pressure, that mounting pressure and responsibility as those roles increased?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I did beat myself up when I was wrong.
Okay.
but I think it's like everything in life. When the good stuff happens and you're right about it, you just got to overweight that. Because if you've only, it's like what you said about golf. You can't change the past. So you can't, if you worry about the last shot, you're going to take your mind off the next shot. So, thankfully I got most of it right, and we were able
Hmm.
to kind of focus on the success of it, and build on that momentum. And, kind of, I think success begets success. Like the more confident we as a group were in making our decisions, the more skilled and more successful we were, because we were like taking more shots at bat, or whatever metaphor you use. Like we were doing more things and allowing the success to happen. Because if you get kind of that stuntedness because you can't make decisions, then it just starts to spiral, because
Yeah.
you're not moving anywhere. So I think it was, it was like a work in progress, and I definitely had some low points, and not everything was perfect, but on average, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if on average it didn't go pretty well.
But I guess that's my point, in where I want people to find value in your experience and your journey in this conversation, is that it doesn't always go well. And it's very easy to beat yourself up. And in fact, you were probably really good at it, like most successful people are. But then there's, a way to more compassionately work through things with yourself, and then also with other people, because inevitably there's going to be other people underneath you, or you're working with, that are also going to make mistakes, and you have to work with that too.
Well, yeah, I'll give a plug. There's a book called The Confidence Code that was written by Katty Kay, who's a journalist at the BBC, who I got
Hmm.
to know a bit when I was there, and another journalist. And they were coming at this topic from the perspective of women, and in that case, successful women, and saying how women tend to beat themselves up a bit when they're not perfect. And so when a job comes around, if we don't have like 90% of the skills, we don't raise our hands. And this is, they studied this area. So I'm not saying it without, some foundation in the facts. And they said, like, it's it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to raise your hand if you don't have 100% of the skills, because you don't grow otherwise. And the people that do raise their hands are the ones that are going to get the jobs. So part of it, I think, is just this notion of betting on yourself, and not beating yourself up too much. And there's a lot of great examples, from both of them in the book, about how, even though they're so great at what they do, they still beat themselves up. So I think part of it is just realizing that it's okay. Perfection is not the goal. Um, we if we hold ourselves to that standard, we don't move forward.
Yeah.
And Anna Quinlan wrote a book, about, it's called Being Perfect, and she said at one point in her life she's decided, like, I'm done with being perfect. And she said it was like taking a backpack full of bricks off of her back, and just going, oh, I'm not carrying this backpack anymore. I can't
Yeah.
aspire to that standard. It's too much. And so when you're leading teams, they're not expecting perfection. They're expecting leadership and decision making and confidence. And so I think that's the kind of epiphany that I had along the way, that, it's how you frame it. and you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to lead, and you do have to move forward. And
Yeah.
I'm a good problem solver. So as long as you're problem solving and showing some results and showing movement and giving them the leadership that they're craving, it just works out.
Yeah. There's a really good mindfulness teacher I had on named Drew Buss, and he shared a very similar sentiment about, as a stress teacher, there is in the classes, the thousands of people that he's taught, there's no expectation that I'm going to be perfect. In fact, it's those moments where I'm not that are, really
You learn more.
educational.
Yeah, you learn a lot more from when things don't work out than when things do.
Yeah. No, it's when you can how to say structure, in that way and just operate, in the operating system, like that's the way that people, I think they buy in. They're going to trust you more when they know that that's okay to
Yeah.
have that sort of framework around you.
Yes. And I've had so many great opportunities to add different skills onto into the mix. And the Warner job, I could have never done if I had only taken the jobs that I was going to be perfect at.
Uh-huh.
I don't even know where I would have stalled out, but it wouldn't have gone the way it did, because I took some interesting jobs. Like I told you, I took some pay cuts along the way. I worked at the WNBA for a couple of years. 04, 05, I was the COO of the league, and early days still. We didn't have Caitlin Clark back then, and
Yeah.
the game was still evolving. I loved it. I brought some new ideas to the league, um, but it was a challenge, and I love a good challenge, so I didn't shy away from challenges. I had a great 4.5 year run at Dow Jones, helping them expand more into B2C businesses and helping to build the brand and franchise of the Wall Street Journal. An amazing 9 years at the BBC after that, helping to build the BBC brand more in the US, because it was really only known as a news brand when we got in there, and helped punch out BBC America into, and bring Doctor Who and Top Gear, and Planet Earth and other big shows that were being sold to other networks, bringing them back to the BBC, and really trying to punch out what the BBC stood for in the entertainment side, in addition to the news side. And
Yeah.
9 years into that is when I got the call for Warner Brothers. And so, a lot of accumulative experiences along the way. I was not a one company person, but I did have very meaningful stints: 10 years at Viacom, 9 years at the BBC, um, etc. So I knew what it felt like to be in a big company for a period of time, and to know how those kinds of companies work, big media companies.
Yeah.
And so I felt, you're never fully equipped, but again, like I felt like I could figure it out pretty quickly.
But that's, I think, helpful for people to know, right? Like you're never maybe feel like you're fully equipped for everything, right? Like but you're prepared enough. And that's a big part of performance too. Like you train, as hard as you can for as long as you can. And at some point it's enough, and if you go overboard, it's usually when you get into problems or you get hurt overtraining or other things. Or, with perfectionism, which is, an anxiety, really, it's fear based, that you never really take your shot because you're afraid of not doing well.
I think a lot of people get stymied because of fear.
Hmm.
And and
Yeah.
and it's a little bit of luck along the way. If somebody can help you overcome that fear and unlock new skills that you kind of deep down know you have, but haven't been demonstrated yet, so you're not, you feel like it's a little risky to
Yeah.
bet on them. um
Yeah, I
but
mean, two themes in my life: fear and doubt. But you use the term unlock, which is fantastic. When you can actually address those things, you could start to unlock your life and start to go in a direction that you want. And that's a big deal to be aware of those edges and to start to address them and work with them in a very mindful way.
Yeah. I would like to give a shout out to my husband, Richard, who there were various moments when I was kind of sometimes feeling the least equipped to take on new responsibilities, like this moment at Nickelodeon when I had a newborn and our daughter was 3, and I was getting another set of new responsibilities. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. He's like, you can do this. Come on. And so, there might be spouses out there or partners who say, more selfishly, I want you to focus more on the family or more on me. And he was always a big champion and kind of helped boost my confidence that I could figure it out. And, not at the expense of the family, but in addition to, like, we were going to work this out. We're going to figure out the ecosystem that can support you so you can take this new responsibility on. And that's great. And, nowadays I think young couples are more equal partners, but I know, however many years ago that was, it wasn't always the case. Usually one person in the couple had to step back a little bit
Uh-huh.
to allow the other person's career to thrive. So we somehow figured out a way to do it so that we were both feeling like we were growing in our careers.
Well, it sounds like there was support, love, and encouragement to make that effort.
For sure. And another big unlock for me, which, I don't know if this will resonate with any of your listeners, but when Jerry Laybourne was running Nickelodeon and I was running strategy, I remember there was one week where I was working really hard on the big budget presentation, and I showed up at her desk on Friday morning with all the PowerPoint presentations, and she looked at me and she said, "You look awful." And I said, "Well, and again, I had 2 small kids, Rachel and Peter, and burning the candle at both ends." And I said, "Yeah, I haven't gotten a lot of sleep this week." And I thought she was going to say, "You need to get home and sleep." And she didn't say that. She said, "You need to bring Rachel and Peter into the office." And I was like, "What?" Like, this is the last thing I thought anybody was going to say to me after the week that I just had. But she said, her kids, Sam and Emmy, felt like they were a part of what she was doing at Nickelodeon. And she said, "You need to bring your kids in and make them feel a part of this and let them know why you leave the house in the morning. What do you do? And where do you do it?" And I thought, oh my gosh. And that was another huge unlock for me because, well, first of all, let's be clear, Nickelodeon is a pretty fun place to bring your kids.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So it's not like I was in an investment bank, but I did kind of need her to give me permission. And then, about, I don't know, once every month or two, I would bring them in and just let them hang out and see what I did. And it made them very invested, I think, in my career. And, mommy works, and I like that mommy works, and here's what she does every day. And it just changed the frame for me.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds, you received the permission slip, but that it changed the entire perspective of it for not only you, but also your kids getting that buy-in, and that also, again, going back to encouragement and support and love ultimately.
Because it's a whole system, right? It's not just
Yeah.
you, it's your partner, it's your family, it's your broader family. And I had so many people rooting for me and believing in me and kind of, just saying, "We're here for you, go do it."
Yeah.
That meant the world to me. My siblings, my parents, obviously they're not here anymore, but when they were alive, they were very much like, just, so thrilled with whatever success I had.
Yeah.
My dad always wanted to write something for the local paper. I'm like, "No, I'm good, Dad. You don't have to do that." But it was also new to them as well. And so that means a lot. It really means a lot.
Well, you took some giant strides, and even going back to the Warner Brothers thing, getting the call, becoming the first woman CEO and chair. I mean, it's not just you and your family, it's, a lot of other women cheering you on and sort of seeing what you're doing as well.
It was a great feeling because there was a lot of people that I worked with over the years in all of those different companies that just came out and really like, way to go, like, go get them, like, they're kind of rooting for you. And then when something good like that happens, I just felt tremendous support. And honestly, like, that's a big part of when you're a leader, you want people to want to work for you, right? And what goes around comes around. If you're not great to people who work for you, that eventually hurts you. And so to have what they call followership and people who want to kind of come to work for you when you move to a different company, et cetera,
Uh-huh.
is very important because the word gets out. The word gets
Yeah.
out as to what kind of leader you are, how you treat people, how smart you are, of course, and whether you're going to do a good job with the business. Because if that doesn't work, nothing else does. But um,
Right.
thankfully, I had good followership, and that meant a lot to me.
What advice or do you tend to give, maybe, I know you mentor a lot of people, but to maybe younger women who are kind of coming up, to encourage them to kind of, get where you got, and maybe even beyond, right?
I think it's a combination of everything we've talked about in terms of betting on yourself, not
Hmm.
needing to be perfect, um, really trying to show as broad a range of skills as you can, um, because the resume can be a limiter. It's like you have to pop off the page in a way and show that you've got volition and passion and skills that aren't necessarily in the job descriptions that you've had. And part of that is through interpersonal relationships, networking. um, One of the things I didn't do well earlier because I was so focused on my career was kind of getting out in the world and in networking, and that epiphany happened probably when I was in my early 40s. Like, wow, I really need to go out there and have breakfasts or coffees, whatever, with people, just to not looking for a job per se, but just to really learn about what other people do and build relationships in other parts of the industry. And so I encourage people to do that, like, not get so tunnel vision in your job that you're not like looking out. And it also helps with your self-worth when you do talk to people, you can kind of get a sense of how you're doing, and not necessarily how you're compensated relative to others, but what other career paths are happening around you. I think it's really good to keep a little percentage of your time focused outward, not just inward, in your current job. And just again, like I was told, believe in yourself, and you can be anything you want to be. If you want to run something someday, get a P&L early, even if it's a small business, even if it feels kind of like, I don't know where this is going to lead. um, try to
Yeah.
like, don't look for the beaten path. Look for some offshoots to the beaten path, which is, I had so many offshoots in my journey. I try to open people's apertures, or help them open their apertures to what other possibilities there are. And it can be really fun. I love the mentoring conversations that I have with people, because especially if you can help share a story from your own career or life that unlocks something in them, it's like, wow, okay, that, pay it forward, right? Do the good one.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I I was getting the image of, the game on the Price is Right, the Plinko game. They had this where they drop this disc like in this game board, and it just, you don't know where it's gonna bounce, right?
Ah,
But in mindfulness, we have this term, or one of the foundations and one of the programs I teach is dancing with uncertainty. Like, you have to
mhm.
learn how to dance with that. And if you can look at it in this sort of a game, if you will, and not, resist it or push it away, things can really open up for you. And I think that kind of touches on what you were just saying there.
I love that. That's a hard thing to do. I mean, we're all, you know, people like to have control over things.
Sure.
I would say, broadly speaking,
Yeah.
kind of highly successful type A people want to be in control, but and uncertainty is the foil of that, right? But the uncertainty can be the thing that opens up new avenues, new pathways. So if you can tolerate a certain amount of it, I think we are all better off with a certain amount of uncertainty.
Well, sure. It's like the one thing that is certain is change.
Yes. Actually, when I left Nickelodeon, I got recruited to be the COO of VH1, and the book Who Moved My Cheese came out right about then. You may not have heard of it. It's a
No.
tiny little book, and it's about a mouse, and the cheese keeps getting moved. And so I bought a copy of that and gave it to my direct reports at Nickelodeon, saying, "Look, I know you're probably scratching your head. Why is she leaving? Like, we're doing such amazing things. We've gotten to this big place, but I think you can do this. Like, keep growing." And they did phenomenally well after I left. Like, it was enough time for me to be there, and I hired my successor and moved on to finally got my music job at VH1 and country music television. And yeah, just the cheese moves, but it's like how you react to it is what counts.
Yeah. Very good. You've shared a lot of really wonderful things. What is there any other positive messages you want to pass on from wisdom that you've learned on your journey and your remarkable career?
I think maybe the one thing I didn't say that I'd like to highlight is that when we work for a company, we are being paid to do the best thing for that company and do what's right for the company. I think sometimes personal agendas can get into the mix of things.
Uh-huh.
And, like I've said to people along the way, like, make your boss successful. Do what's right for the company, your boss. Good things will happen to you. And that, I feel like I've gotten pulled up so many times because I just did my job really well, and the person above me did well. And then, like the guy, Herb Scannell, who was the president of Nickelodeon, after Jerry left, ended up hiring me to work at the BBC, 10 years later. So good things happen when you have the right goal and the right focal point.
Yeah.
And so kind of the flip side of that is, if you focus on yourself too much, and I want to be promoted and I want to get a raise and this and that, like, do a good job and those good things will happen. It's not that you shouldn't advocate for yourself, but it's just keeping your eye on that prize of what's right for the company is really important. The relationship with your boss, the success of the company, all those things will bring goodness to you. Even if it's like in the short term, it feels like, other things are more important. The long game is make the company successful.
Excellent. You had previously mentioned your experience with the WNBA and Caitlin Clark. However, you have some new things going on, and also with Angel Reese. Could you tell us a little bit about
You mean the Unrivaled?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my husband and I invested in a startup league called Unrivaled, which is the 3-on-3 league happening right now as we speak in Miami. And it's really to help the players make more money and stay in market in the off season. One of the issues we and I had 20 years ago when I was at the W was that the players just didn't make enough money to be able to live with that salary for that amount of time. So they would go overseas and play in other leagues in the off season, which sometimes led to injuries, sometimes led to we at the league, you couldn't necessarily use them to help promote the league in the off season. So the whole ecosystem was not working. One of the points of Unrivaled is to help keep the players in market, give them a equity interest in the league, pay them more money, and it's very complementary to the WNBA. To try to keep the players in shape and playing and loving the sport and the fans loving them in the off season of the WNBA.
Well, it's really cool. It's definitely innovative, and it's changing the paradigm of women's sports. So it's very cool. And I know you're involved in women's tennis as well.
Yes,
So you've stayed true to that.
I love sports. And
Well,
yeah, I didn't again didn't know that that was going to come back into my life, but it's been great. I'm on the board of WTA Ventures, which is the commercial side of the WTA that was created 2 years ago, and we're really helping to grow the sport and continue to push for pay equity for the women. So that's been super fun. And
yeah.
so, and then I'm also on the board of Regal Cinemas, Cineworld Regal, the number 2 movie theater chain, and PayPal, which I've been on for 7.5 years. So those are my 3 commercial boards, and loving that, and feeling like I'm having some impact on each of those 3 boards. So it's been great. It's been really great.
Wonderful. Well, and those leagues, by the way, are lucky to have you, who's a sports fan, bringing your wealth of business knowledge to kind of help, further their goals and aspirations. It's really terrific.
Thank you, Jim. Well, sports and entertainment are very fused these days.
Yeah.
Sports is the number one thing driving viewership on a lot of the media outlets that we're watching. So it's very much part of the same thought process. As people think about what to watch, sports, a movie, television series, et cetera, it's all kind of in the same genre these days.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Ann Sarnoff, and thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to talk to you, and good luck with your work.
Thank you.
Doing great things.
We're trying. We're trying. A
Yes,
lot of change happening, right?
absolutely. That can be good. Change is good.
It's always good. Always good. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in today and being with us. May you find joy, flow, and adventure on your journey. And if you got something from it, please like, share, and subscribe and or comment. It means a lot. Thank you.